What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 22 deadline. So basically, I'm going to go through a bunch of your questions. Don't forget that the deadline is on Friday, so it's today at 6:30 UK time. I'm also not going to talk more about my team in this video because I did team selection yesterday, and to be honest with you, at the time of recording, I'm not that much more advanced in figuring out exactly which move I want to make. So you'll have to tune into the deadline stream later to see what I finally go through with, and that's not to build up suspense. I just generally do not have a clue right now. So let's get into it. First question is about triple captain. We are not going to spend long on this whatsoever. It's worth a triple captain Haaland versus Rashford head-to-head deep dive. I think that's where a lot are wavering right now. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think there's any more information that's going to help you make this decision. You could go into absolutely, micro level detail, exactly how many expected goals, expected assists have they had in each game over the last few weeks, how are they likely to play against Crystal Palace and Leeds versus, how Haaland and City might set up against Villa and Arsenal. Ultimately, you've got all the information you need at this point. Rashford's got the better fixtures, but Haaland is the better FPL player. He's also guaranteed to be on penalties. That is not the case with Rashford, although he could be. I don't really know what more information you need. I would use it in 22 or 23 for all the reasons I've already mentioned, that in the other weeks where you might have a better triple captain, you might want to use bench boost or free hit or wildcard in those weeks. So I probably would just get it out of the way now. I would probably use it on Rashford, but there's not a huge amount to it. Haaland is definitely the better FPL player. The only thing I would say, and this might just confuse you even more than you were before about this particular decision, is yesterday I did a YouTube members stream and we were talking about this. And I said, if we fast forwarded to game week 24, and I said to you that one of Rashford or Haaland has blanked, who do you think is more likely? And I suspect that most people would jump to Rashford being the one that's blank, because we just cannot imagine Haaland blanking in any given game week, especially when he's got 2 games. So in that regard, you could go for Haaland because he's more sure to probably get you something, but I don't necessarily think that he's more likely to get you that bigger score, because as good as Man City are, they've got to come up against that Arsenal defence, which is extremely good. But it could be that Haaland just gets 1 goal against Arsenal, finishes on 6 points, which is fine, but then he goes and gets 2 or 3 against Villa and ends up close to 20 points plus. So I can't help you make this decision anymore. I think early on in the season, most of us would have expected to use the triple captain on Haaland. That's part of the reason I used it in game week 20. And if that was your thinking, maybe you just stick to that and use it on him in game week 23. There's not a right or a wrong answer. I think it will end up being quite close. And if one of these beats the other one by like 15 or more points, that is just harsh. That is just FPL. So I'm not going to go into a deep dive because I don't think there's much more I can help you with. And if you still don't know, I'm recording this at 10 a.m, so that's 8.5 hours till the deadline, I think it's time to just start flipping coins. So who are the best non-Shaw and David De Gea defensive options from Man United? I think the only 3 you can really look at are on screen, so Wan-Bissaka, Varane and Martinez. And I think the best option is probably Varane in terms of the most nailed player. Obviously, whether or not you're going for just one of these instead of Shaw because of money, or you want to double up, obviously that's completely up to you, very team dependent. I do think the fixtures in the double mean at least 1 clean sheet, possibly 2. They do blank in game week 25, so obviously keep that in mind when you're making your transfers. But I don't see Varane getting bench too often. I think with Martinez, I don't really see him as a big issue. I think for most of the time, we're going to see Dalot or Wan-Bissaka, Varane, Martinez and Luke Shaw. It just puts me off a little bit that we've seen Luke Shaw play left centre-back. So if in one of the games, Ten Hag decides he wants to rest Martinez or he wants to get Shaw and Malacia on the pitch, then he can do that. We've seen it previously. So if you've got Martinez, I would probably hold on to him, but I don't think I would buy him. And then with Wan-Bissaka, the problem is, I'm recording this before the press conferences because obviously we've got the Friday deadline. We don't really know how long Diogo Dalot is out for, and as soon as he's back, he is going to provide competition for Wan-Bissaka. Yes, Wan-Bissaka has looked a little bit better recently. He's obviously being coached nicely by Ten Hag, but he's still not as good as Dalot, I would say. So even if he plays both games in the double, you might just about get away with it. And look, if Dalot is ruled out for a few weeks, you could go for him as a short-term option, but you'd want to be sure that Dalot is not going to play. So I think if you're going for minutes, Varane is probably the best option. But obviously, if you haven't got any defenders you can afford it, you should be going for Luke Shaw. Okay, so I'm sure there's a lot of you out there with Anthony Martial. So do you think Martial will get many minutes this double? Should I keep for one more week or take a -4 to go to Bruno and Nketiah? So let's talk about the minutes first of all. He came on for 27 minutes against Nottingham Forest in the Carabao Cup. I think that is a good good thing. Man United's fixtures are basically Palace at home, Leeds at home in the double, then it's Leeds away, then I believe it's the Barcelona first leg fixture, then it's Leicester, then they play Barcelona again. One thing for sure, their course has been good, but I think Man United are better with Martial. So he is still first choice. So Ten Hag needs him to be able to get to a level of fitness where he can play him more often. That's the reason why I think he will start at least one of the games in the double and probably come off the bench in the other one. So if I had to hazard a guess of a realistic minutes kind of, prediction, it would probably be 90 across the 2 games. So at that point, it does become a conversation whether or not the -4 is worth it, because you're essentially spending 4 points to almost guarantee another fixture. Now, for a lot of people, it's going to depend on what structure you want to go for kind of longer term. So in this example, taking a -4 to get Bruno in, who is definitely a better option than Martial for the double, because he's almost guaranteed to play 90 minutes, because that's what he always does. He might come off slightly early, but he's going to start in both games. And then to get Nketiah, who's a great option from this week, right through the double in 23, the blank in 25, the blank in 28, where Arsenal will play as well. I think that's a pretty good move, but only if having Bruno doesn't mess you up for future transfers. So for my team, for example, I've got Bruno in a 3-5-2, and unless I pivot to go for Mahrez, I'm not actually sure what I will do with Fernandes, because I know I said I wasn't going to talk too much about my team, but just bear with me a second. For this, let's say I keep Ake and Ederson, then what do I do with Fernandes in a 3-5-2? There's not a huge amount of options. I would probably pivot and put that money up front to a third forward, or put it into defence. If Liverpool got a double, maybe just take a punt on Trent Alexander-Arnold. So that's the only thing I would say. For a lot of you on 3-4-3, it's going to be much easier. You're going to get Fernandes in, and then you're going to swap to a Man City attacker, or if you haven't got 3 Arsenal, you're just going to go for Odegaard or Saka instead. And I think in those situations, that's what I would probably do. So yeah, if getting Bruno in then lets you get in a better double game week player in 23, I would take the hit. For those of you that don't have the transfers or the structure or the money to get to Bruno Fernandes, I would hold Martial and just hope that he gets 90 minutes across the double, knowing that they're 2 good fixtures and he could get returns in either of them. So I know a lot of you are probably not looking to use the free hit this week, but some of you might be considering it for blank game week 25 or blank game week 28. And that will play a part into what transfers you make this week. So for example, if you were going to use it in blank game week 25, you could load up on Brighton players this week because they've got good fixtures in 22, 23 and 24. You could then free hit them out in 25 and then have them back for 26 and 27 where they made double. So that's why we're going to answer this question. So which has more upside, free hit in a double game week or in a blank game week? It feels like double game week basically is the way to go, but fear always makes me do it in a blank. It's not really about fear, but it's also not about upside in any particular week. It's about the upside over a span of game weeks. So if you're looking at blank game week 28 versus double game week 29, well, which week is going to give you the most points from a free hit? Of course, it's the double game week, right? There's going to be more teams to pick from, and they've got 2 fixtures. But that's not how you judge when to use the free hit. It's about getting the most amount of points in that week and the weeks either side of it. So to take your point on using it in a blank, the reason that most people do that in a normal season is because the blank game weeks are based on teams that get through in the cup. So the teams that get through in the cup are usually, not always, the better teams, the likes of Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool, Man City, etc., who we usually want players from, and therefore we also want them outside of the blank. So if I don't know, say you've got a triple up of Haaland, De Bruyne and Mahrez, let's say they're all nailed on and they've got good fixtures in 27 and 26, but they blank in 28, but then they've got good fixtures in 29 and 30, you're going to want to not take them out just to cover that blank. Well, what can you do instead? You can free hit. So yeah, you might free hit into some rubbish teams, but it means you don't have to have players from those teams in the other weeks. For what it's worth, the way things are shaping up this season with blank 28, blank 32, and then a possible big double in 29, it might be better to plan in the weeks either side, getting different players that you won't have in the double, and you might actually be better off free hitting in game week 29, which is a double, but it's all going to depend on how the fixtures fall for the doubles and also who gets through in the cup competition. So there's not much point worrying about it right now, but that is why I wouldn't use it in game week 25, because either side of 25, you've only got small double game weeks that can be managed with free transfers. When we get into the latter stages of the season, you've got a blank in 28, a double in 29, a blank in 32, a double in 34, you're going going to need your free hit to manage that situation. If you haven't got it, like, I wouldn't panic. And if you really want to use it in 25, I don't want to put you off, but I'm just trying to explain it's not about the upside in one given week. It's about the upside over a span of weeks, which is why I would try and save it until later on. So I've got Cancelo and I want a Man City defender. Who's the best option? Now, for what it's worth, I don't know if there's a defender that's going to play every single game between now and kind of game week 28, which is probably when you'd want them because they've got good fixtures. They'll play in game week 25 and they've got a double in game week 23. So really, we're just looking at who is the best option. Now, I know a lot of people suddenly like Rico Lewis even more than they did before, but Cancelo has only actually played one game at right back all season. So I do think Rico Lewis is first choice, but Kyle Walker can also play that role. So Lewis might come off early, which we've seen before, or Walker just might start instead. So I probably wouldn't go there. I also don't think I would go for Laporte, and obviously Diaz is only just back from injury. So it's really between these two. Now again, Cancelo has played left back most of the time when he's played for Man City this season. Obviously that's not going to happen now because he's gone to Bayern Munich. So you would assume that Ake is now a better option. My main worry is that Laporte literally just played left back against Wolves in game week 21. So it's not like Ake is completely nailed on either. And if you don't follow a guy called Luke, FF Scout Luke on Twitter, he also does an Inspected Goals podcast on YouTube. He talks a lot about the Man City lineup and does think that Ake is a pretty good choice, but also says he's not necessarily needed in the easier games because they can play players that are better on the ball like Diaz, Laporte and Akanji. And that is annoying as an Ake owner because the easier games where you do want him to play. So in terms of the best options, it's probably Akanji or Ake. But if you want a nailed-on player that's going to start every game, I don't think there is one, right? Even Akanji, I know he's played pretty much every game, but he has missed one. And right now, while John Stones is out, he probably is nailed on. But as soon as John Stones is back, if Diaz is fit and Laporte and Ake, it gets a little bit more difficult to know if Akanji will play every game. So if I was buying one right now, it would be one of these two. And based on what Pep says later about John Stones, it would probably be Akanji. Otherwise, I would go for Ake. But if you're expecting to be able to play them every single game and that they'll start, I think you're going to be sorely disappointed. And I say that as an Ake owner who may well keep him. I might sell him, I don't know yet. But either way, I do not expect him to play every game that I need him for. So quite simply, are there any good Chelsea options? And I think, yes, there probably is. Even if it's not now, there will be quite soon, as long as fitness and stuff is okay. And also, Chelsea are quite important to us. So if we look at the Chelsea players on FPL, I don't actually have any right now because I sold Kepa, which is looking like a mistake. But they've got some pretty nice fixtures. So, for example, Fulham at home, West Ham away, Southampton at home. All pretty nice for a defender or an attacker. Yes, it's Spurs away in 25, but they don't blank at least. So that's another plus or positive for them. Then it's Leeds and Leicester, not bad fixtures. And then they also play in game week 28 as well. Where that is going to be a blank game because of the FA Cup results, but Chelsea and Everton will play. That is one of the games that is definitely on. So we should be looking at Chelsea players. From a defensive point of view, Kepa is the obvious choice. And if you need a goalkeeper transfer and you're not looking to just go for a double game week at like De Gea, Ramsdale, Ederson or Meslier, Kepa is definitely the best choice to bring in. Defensively, I'm probably going to pronounce this guy's name wrong, but Badiashile, 5 million, played the last two games, 90 minutes in both against Palace and Liverpool, done pretty well too. If he can keep his place, he looks like a really good option. You know my favourite is Reece James. He's only 5.7 million. If he can prove his fitness and finally get a run of games, like he's definitely someone I'm looking at. Not right now necessarily, although Chelsea game is on Friday night. It's the first game of the game week this week. If we got the early lineup and he was in it, I mean, I could be tempted for Fulham at home. You never know. Maybe bench Mitrovic. It could be an absolute disaster, but it would be tempting. But we've been there before, getting him too early and then he gets injured again. But if he could prove his fitness by 24, like, I really like that as a run. I will be looking at getting Reece James in or a Chelsea defender. With the attackers, it's much more difficult. Sterling, James and Chilwell are all back in the squad for Fulham apparently. So Sterling is now someone that can play on the left. Mudryk can play on the left. João Felix, when he's back from suspension, will play one of the attacking roles, I'm sure. They've got Havertz. Like, just look at this list. Pulisic when he's back from injury. Ziyech, although I'm not sure about him right now, given what happened with his move. And so, just in general, there's a lot of players that can play in those attacking roles. I'm just not sure who's nailed. Mount seems to play every game when's fit, so he might still be the best option for these fixtures. But I get why people are looking at João Felix and Mudryk because they're a bit more exciting. It's just about how many minutes they will get. So I don't think there's a rush to get Chelsea players right now. That Badiashile guy again, pronounced wrong probably, if he keeps starting, is good value at 5 million. But very soon we need to keep an eye on Chelsea players because they're going to help us get through the blanks. I think they might have a double game week in game week 29 as well. It's not confirmed, but it looks likely. So yeah, there are some good options. I'm just not sure if we need them right now. Okay, so I'd be interested to know your views on who are the new transfers from outside the Premier League we should be watching. To be honest with you, a lot of players came in, but from an FPL perspective, I don't know if there's that many that really interest me. I guess João Felix and Mudryk, who I just mentioned for Chelsea, could be options. I'm just not sure about Mudryk's minutes going forward, especially with Sterling back. Graham Potter already said that he hasn't played much football since November. He looks very exciting, but in terms of having a run in the team every single week, I'm just not sure it's there. João Felix might solve a forward issue for me because he takes up a forward spot for just 7.5 million. But again, I need to see what happens when everyone is fit. So the only player, because I mean, players like Jorginho and Trossard, they're just not going to get enough minutes for Arsenal, I don't think. It's probably Pedro Porro, who's only coming at 5 million for Spurs. I just... As much as I don't think anyone really rates Emerson Royale that much, Conte seems to, or at least he seems to play him more often than most people think he should. Maybe now he's got a new sign-in, maybe that won't happen as much. And after Man City at home this week, the fixtures are pretty good, and they've got Chelsea at home in 25, so they don't blank. Then it's Wolves away and Forest at home. He is quite interesting to me, but I need to see how much he plays before that. So again, he's a player that I might wait until game week 24. But his numbers, his attacking numbers, from Sporting Lisbon are very good, and if he can apply that to the Premier League for 5 million, he could be an absolute bargain. I guess my worry is we were here at the start of the season with Perisic and it just hasn't worked out because of rotation, so that's what worries me. I might have a look at all the signings for next week, like you say, maybe talk about them in the game week preview, and let me know in the comments below if you think there is anyone we should be looking at. But ultimately, I don't think there is a lot of interest from an FPL point of view in terms of players we might select. There might be players that have come in that could improve other teams, like Enzo Fernandez, I think, is a great signing for Chelsea, for example, that overall could definitely improve them. So that might make Chelsea options better, but I don't think he is a FPL option, if that makes sense. But let me know down below if you disagree. Hit that like button if you've enjoyed this one. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you later for the deadline stream.